Judith, do you actually use these dreams to help your patients?
Oh, with every patient I see, I help them to remember their dreams because it's an important process of awakening in psychotherapy. Because the dreams will bring you all kinds of information that you cannot access with your linear mind. And so I teach all my patients the dream technique in emotional freedom. And then I help them work with their dreams and really use them to illuminate their lives. And there are different types of dreams. One is a psychological dream, and these are dreams that illuminate, how you can overcome difficult emotions, your fears, your anxiety.
Break that down in terms. I know you have the psychological dreams. There's nightmares. There's all kinds of. Break down the premonitions.
Premonitions.
People communicating with us. So in a psychological dream, how do they know it's a psychological dream?
Well, the difference between a psychological dream and, let's say, a premonition or a psychic dream is that it has a very intense emotional content. It's very highly charged. You see, the way you tell accurate intuitions is they're usually neutral, either that or they're compassionate, or it's almost as if you're seeing a movie unfold before you, but you're not actually part of it. It's just information that comes through in terms of premonitions. It doesn't have very much of an emotional charge.
Okay.
Whereas emotional dreams and psychological dreams are filled with anger and anxiety and resentments. That's what they're supposed to do.
Fear. That's a psychological dream.
Yeah.
And so they're giving you a message to change. They're giving you a message to look at something.
Absolutely. For instance, if you have a dream that you're being chased by a malevolent pursuer on the edge of a cliff, and you wake up and you go, oh, I'm so happy that was only a dream. Don't leave it at that. You need to look in your waking life, who is that person pursuing you? Who is that dark force? Is it your abusive alcoholic father? Is it a teacher? Is it an old boyfriend? Who is that person? So that you could begin to work with that and free yourself from that pattern of being chased.
Mm-hmm. So this is not just undigested food that's churning and becoming a part of your dream state. I mean, it could be that, but as we become more sensitive, we're able to tell the difference between an emotional, psychological dream and the premonitions. If we do what you said, and that is to actually begin to write them down. I imagine as one begins to write them, I mean, I know I do. I've been doing this for years. I found some old journals of mine that, 20, 30 years ago, and I was looking at those particular dreams that I was having back then. And, they become a large dimension of my life now. I remember having these wonderful dreams of these deep pools of water and pulling out these wonderful crystalline light things from the water. And I became aware that I was receiving insight and things of that particular nature, which now is kind of where my life has lived from. I'm just surrounded by this presence, and I receive a lot of insight that I get to share with the world. But I can remember seeing those in dream states years ago. And also initiations. I imagine you may want to talk about that a little bit. I remember having initiations in the dream state of actually going to other levels of consciousness and then that being integrated into my life in the so-called linear world. But
yes, that brings up a really interesting point, because sometimes in your dreams, this happens to me and a lot of my patients, if you talk to people and you interact with people you don't know on this realm, and, that you talk to them just as if you know them, and they're very familiar to you, but you've never seen them. And what I would suggest in those cases, really notice what they look like, and notice if you can find their names. And sometimes they appear here on Earth. And if they do, you want to pay special attention to them. You could dream about someone. Like, for instance, I would occasionally have dreams that, let's say, Joanne is going to call me as a patient. And then in a week, Joanne calls.
Yes.
And in that case, I pay special attention. There's always some kind of connection that we need to pursue. And so the people in your dreams, or who you interact with in your dreams, if they do show up here, pay special attention. I mean, I've had patients who've met their soulmates in dreams, and then they hadn't met them before, and then suddenly they appear in their lives.
I know. And I used to direct a world ministry of prayer. And oftentimes the night before I would go into work, I would dream, and all the people that were going to call the next day, I would meet in the dream state. And when I would answer the phone, they would start to say their name, and I already knew their name. I knew what they wanted prayer for. And it was like I had already done it the night before. in that field of prayer before they even called. That was a very rich time in my life.
Whoa!
I remember one time.
Beautiful.
I remember one time I had a meeting was having a meeting with one of my department heads, and she was bringing a proposal for something she wanted to do in one of the ministries, and so she came in and she started to tell me what the proposal was. She handed it to me, and I said, "Oh yeah, I've already read this. I've already approved it. It's very beautiful." And I started going through the outline of it. And she looked at me with her mouth open. She said, "We haven't never met about this before. This is my first time giving you this proposal." I said, No, you must have forgotten because I've already read this. And I said, I said, "Ask me about it." And I told her the point. And I said, "Oops, that was a dream. I'm sorry. I dreamt all of this." I said, "But it's saving us a lot of time. I don't need to read this. I already read it." So that was more of a premonition, or that was more of like it had already happened in the dream state, and then in the real state was catching up.
Yes, it's a preview.
It's a preview, yeah.
Yeah, that's very beautiful. And it's something, but I want to make the point for everyone listening, it's something that can happen to everyone once you get used to playing in the dream realm and once you get used to remembering your dreams. Because I know a lot of people can't remember and they're not as in touch with it, but if you want to, if this attracts you, go to the section in Emotional Freedom with the techniques on how to remember dreams and go through the different types of dreams, and that begins to program your subconscious to incorporate this into your life. And as you're listening to us talk, it might spark something in you, but don't think that you can't do it, and don't think that psychological dreams aren't just as sacred as any other dream. I believe that what we're given in the dream realm is exactly what we need. And if you're given a dream where you're being chased by your alcoholic father and you're scared to death, I consider that a quite beautiful dream, because the point is it's trying to wake you up.
Yes.
And I don't want anyone to judge dreams and saying, oh, it's much better to have an illuminated dream of light than it is to have a dream of your alcoholic father chasing you, because the dream realm isn't like that. That's the linear mind making judgments. The thing is, you have to accept that you're given what you need, and the purpose is to awaken your soul, whatever dream you're given, and you'll be given exactly what you need, so don't judge that. And I know certain dreams are more anxiety-provoking, and nightmares can cause you to have your heart racing and sweat in the morning, and all kinds of things, but try to look for the message in them so that you can transform. This is where emotional freedom comes from.
Right.
Is the willingness to work with the energy or the material that you're given at night. You see, your linear mind will say, oh, well, I don't want this. Why did I have this nightmare? But your intuition will say, let me take this in. Let me see how this can free me.
Right. And for those of you just tuning in, she earlier described emotional freedom as the freedom to not simply react to other people or to circumstances, but to learn to respond to a larger energy field, whether that's love or God or whatever word you want to put there. So you're not just merely entangled in your emotions, but there's a level of liberation and freedom that I imagine, and I know for sure, you have then greater access to creativity, greater access to inspiration, greater access to the higher aspects of your being that can then express and bring forth solutions and answers into your life, rather than reacting to circumstances and then developing compulsive behaviors to keep yourself from feeling that particular fear. Now, there's a difference, I imagine, between a real dream premonition and fear. There's a difference between those two, right?
Oh, yes. A real dream premonition predicts the future. And the great thing about dream journals is that you can go back and say, okay, I dreamed this, and it came true maybe a month later, because the timeline for dreams can be a little fuzzy sometimes. When something will happen, you don't quite know. You dream it.
Right.
You don't quite know. I mean, I had people write me about 9/11, about seeing planes going into big buildings and explosions in New York. One woman wrote me year to the date before the 9/11 happened. 9/11 a year before on that date.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't know exactly when the date is sometimes.
Right.
But then you keep it in your journal, and then you can find out. And so that's important. But fear dreams have a very strong emotional charge. But if you break down premonitions, they actually are quite neutral. You're just being shown something. It's seeing something versus reacting to something. You may secondarily have a reaction to it, but the primary information that comes through is neutral. It's just you're being shown something. It's being a true visionary. It's bearing witness to something when you're shown something. And I want to make the point that there are times when you can't do anything about what you see. And this is, many of my patients have a problem with this because they feel like, well, why am I shown this and I can't do anything about it? And what I believe deeply is that bearing witness to certain things is light bearing. And that being given the sight and being able to see certain things in and of itself creates more light. And that sometimes you do what you can, sometimes you can't do anything except hold a heart space for other people around you as they go through trauma.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm in absolute agreement with that. I mean, everything we observe changes simply because we observe it.
Yeah.
And so if we are having a dream about something that appears to be negative and it's a premonition, our observation from the consciousness of compassion and love already is affecting that on a subatomic level, and we might not be able to change the outcome in terms of an experiential level, but our observation and our prayerful observation assists in the unfoldment of the souls, and it assists in healing. In assistant ways, probably we will never be able to see how it assisted, but because our observation is not neutral. Scientists, as you know, talk about the observer effect, that anything you observe, you change on the subatomic level based on your observation. So if you're observing something in a dream state and you're able to maintain emotional freedom, then you're being a beneficial presence.
Yes, you are. And like in ancient times, the seer is somebody who holds that space, who's able to see. That's the function of the seer. And then whether or not you can actually change things depends on the situation. I mean, sometimes you have a prophetic dream that prepares you for something.
Right.
That prepares you for a death or a loss or something that happens in the world. And I want to make the point that sometimes dreams can allow communication with the other side.
Yeah, I want to get into that. Let me just say this. If you're just tuning in to Wake Up the Sound of Transformation, this is Michael Bernard Beckwith, your host. I'm with Judith Orloff, the author of the New York Times bestseller, Emotional Freedom,